Oh boy. USC losing Jakeem Stewart right before the season is bad news, but it may reveal whether this defensive line is finally built different. So this episode of the Big Ten Huddle presented by FanDuel, we're going to be talking about that. And before anybody twists this and twist that, no, I'm not saying Jakeem Stewart getting hurt is somehow a good thing. It's not. Okay, it could have good aspects to it, sure, but it's not a good thing. He's one of the most talented defensive players on this roster. He played through a foot problem last year, and now the concern is that we are talking about the same foot again. But USC does have one thing working in its favor. Timing. The current expectation is that Stewart misses the first 3 games, San Jose State, Fresno State, and Louisiana, which means if that timeline holds, the first game he could be back for is the Big Ten opener at Rutgers on September 19th. And he might even be back for the Louisiana game. We'll see. And then 1 week later comes Oregon. That Oregon game is one I care about the most right now on that schedule, because if USC can get through these first 3 games, develop the depth behind Stewart and get him back for Rutgers and then have him healthy enough to be a real factor against Oregon, this injury does not have to wreck USC's start of the season. It might force USC to find out earlier than expected how real this defensive line depth actually is. So here's exactly what you need to know about all that's going on. Jakeem Stewart suffered another foot injury, and reporting around the program says it is the same foot that bothered him last season. He played through a stress fracture during 2025, still became a freshman All-American, and then had surgery after the season. Now, people around the program have described this new issue as another stress fracture, with the expectation that he will miss USC's first 3 games, maybe the third one, but we'll see. 3 games is different than 3 months, but the same foot part matters here. When a young defensive tackle has already played an entire season through a stress fracture, had surgery, and then has another problem in that same foot before next season even starts, I'm not interested in rushing him back just because conference play begins, right? I want Jakeem Stewart healthy in November, and more importantly, I want him healthy on September 26th. Because Oregon is, at least right now, the most important game on USC's schedule. Yes, Ohio State comes later, Penn State comes later, Indiana, you got a bunch of other games, but this is the one that's most important because you got to win this game. But Oregon is the first game that can completely change the national conversation around this team. You beat Oregon at home, and USC immediately looks like a serious Big Ten and national championship contender. You lose that game, especially because the defensive front cannot hold up, and everybody starts asking the same old questions about Lincoln Riley and USC again. And maybe not USC, not the old ones, but about Lincoln Riley at USC. And I really wish USC had a bye week before Oregon. They do not. USC goes on to Rutgers on September 19th and gets Oregon 7 days later. So if Stewart is back for Rutgers, I would love to see that game function almost like a controlled reentry. Get him some snaps, let him feel contact again, make sure the foot responds well. Do not ask him to play 60 snaps in that game just because it says Big Ten on the schedule. Then try to have the best version of Jakeem Stewart you can possibly have against Oregon. And the reason USC can even think that way is because the defensive line is deeper than USC's defensive lines have gotten to be used to seeing in the past, right? You start with Alex Van Sumeren. This is exactly why bringing in a veteran like Van Sumeren matters. He started 24 games over the previous 2 seasons at Michigan State. He has already emerged as one of the leaders of this defensive front, and the camp reports on him have been extremely positive. We talked about him in one of the live episodes, right? He gives USC a grown-up, Big Ten tested body in the middle of the exact moment they need stability. You don't have to ask, the sophomore Jakeem Stewart to become, something that he can't become yet. You can ask Van Sumeren to be Van Sumeren. Then there is Jide Abasiri. Abasiri started 9 games last season. And one of the most valuable things about him is that USC can use him both inside and outside. If Stewart is unavailable, USC can lean more heavily into Abasiri inside. If the younger tackles prove they can handle those snaps, USC can move him around and create different fronts. That flexibility becomes even more valuable because Luke Wafel has been so impressive at defensive end. Wafel is not a direct Stewart replacement. He's a different player. It's a different role. But Wafel is ready to give USC legitimate snaps on the edge. And the camp buzz suggests he is more than ready. I even saw some comparisons to Jeremiah Smith at one point. Then USC does not have to borrow as many snaps from Abasiri outside. That can indirectly help Stewart inside. Recent reporting is that Wafel is pushing for a major role and potentially becoming USC's number 3 defensive end almost immediately, and possibly a starter by the end of the season. That's what real depth looks like. One injury does not just lead to, okay, well, who's the backup? It gives the staff multiple ways to rearrange the front. And now we get to see the young guys, right? Topui may be the most interesting one. Topui, a 6'3", 320 pounds, and recent camp reporting says that he has taken off after already having a good spring. He was expected to carve out a rotational role before Stewart got hurt, and so now it looks like that role could be elevating. Now, those rotational snaps become even more important. This is exactly the kind of 3-game opening you would choose to have a developmental freshman defensive tackle. USC is favored by 38.5 over San Jose State on FanDuel, and that's a good number for me. I expect USC to cover it. That doesn't mean that San Jose State is meaningless. It means USC should have an opportunity to play Tupui meaningful snaps without asking him to save the season. Let him play, let him get double teamed, let him make a mistake against San Jose State instead of learning that lesson for the first time against a team like Oregon, right? Kind of the same thing with Floyd Bouchard. Bouchard is only a sophomore, but he appeared in 10 games last season and recorded a couple tackles for loss, including a sack. USC already knows what it looks like when he is on a college field. Now you find out whether he can handle more. And Jamian Winfield is another name USC fans need to know. Look at me. Listen to all these defensive linemen for USC. This is fantastic. And it's not just like guys I'm pulling out of nowhere. Like, these are names that have been mentioned, and I'm doing well in camp. Winfield was a 5-star defensive tackle coming in, and the camp feedback has been that he's improved mentally and physically. Maybe not reached that 5-star status yet, but definitely improving. He's another 320-pound body with legitimate upside. Do I want you to rely on a true freshman against Oregon? No. Do I want you to get useful snaps against San Jose State and Fresno State and Louisiana, though? So if USC needs him against Oregon, so he's not experiencing everything for the first time? Absolutely. I want that. Absolutely. That is the potential positive development here. Not the injury. Not the reps. Nobody's happy that Jakeem Stewart, has a boot on his foot and has crutches. For years, though, one of USC's biggest problems was that an injury on the defensive front could expose the roster immediately. This roster is supposed to be different and appears to be different. And now we'll get to see the evidence. Van Sumeren is experienced. Abasiri is versatile. Bouchard has played. Tupui is surging. Winfield has high-end talent, and he's mentally getting there closer. And Jamal Jarrett gives USC another massive veteran body coming back from injury. I can't believe I forgot to mention Jarrett. He gives them another massive veteran body coming back from injury. And Wafel's emergence on the edge gives Gary Patterson gives him even more freedom, another piece that he can use to help everybody else. That's not just one replacement. That is a menu of what you can choose from. And Patterson now has 3 conference games to figure out which combination he trusts the most. Here is the outcome that USC should be chasing. Game 1 against San Jose State, play a lot of bodies and find out who can hold up. Game 2 against Fresno State, start tightening up the rotation, but still put those guys in there and see who can handle it. And if they show they can't handle it against Fresno State, they're probably not super reliable going forward. And then game 3 against Louisiana, treat it like the dress rehearsal for Big Ten football. Then you get Rutgers. If Stewart is cleared and that foot is responding, get him back into the rotation without immediately asking him to carry everything. And then comes Oregon. Because against Oregon, USC does not just need Jakeem Stewart back. USC needs Jakeem Stewart backed up by a defensive line rotation that has already played real football. That is how this injury can create one useful consequence without pretending the injury itself is useful. The worst response would just be panic, right? Rushing Stewart back and never developing the players behind him. But you don't have to do that now, because now you have the response to let Tupui play, let Boucard play, let Winfield continue to grow in his role, continue to lean on Vinsumarin, move Abasiri around and let him take advantage of different opportunities and see how he does in different roles. And then you take advantage of Wayful's emergence as well. And then Stewart comes back. Do not bring him back to, rescue the defensive line, but bring him back as another piece to strengthen the defensive line that already proved it can survive without him. That's the difference between having talent and having a roster. USC believes it has the second one. It's not just talent. They believe they have the roster. If Stewart is healthy by Rutgers, it gets through that game cleanly, and USC rolls into September 26th with a deeper, more experienced front than it had when camp ended, then Oregon is where we may look back and realize these early reps really mattered. And now I'm kind of talking myself out of the bye in the first 5 weeks before Oregon, right? But I'm also still going to be watching that foot closely. Same foot, similar issue, second straight season that deserves caution, that deserves an eye on it. Because USC does not need Jakeem Stewart at 70% against San Jose State. They need the best version of him that he can be, that they can get when they walk out in the Coliseum against the Ducks. If you want more USC and Big Ten football analysis without the national media spin and, maybe a few jabs at the SEC while you're at it a few times, like the video and subscribe to the Big Ten Huddle. And tell me in the comments, which defensive lineman do you trust the most to step up while Stewart is out? Would love your thoughts on that. And would love for you to join us on Sunday and Tuesday nights live here on YouTube, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're on the West Coast, 6 p.m. for you. It's a little bit, not as late, but 9 p.m. Eastern time live here on YouTube. And we're going to be doing a recap of the USC San Jose State game. We'll be watching all this stuff with the defensive line. Join me and Zach for a recap of that game immediately following the game here on YouTube. We'll also post the podcast when we're done there as well, but you can follow us along, and we've got tons of USC football content. The USC fan base has been so fantastic to us. You guys watch the videos, you like, you subscribe, and like I've said on this show before, that we are not apologetic about it. We cater to the people who watch the shows. So if USC fans watch the shows, we are going to make more videos about USC and cover the team as much as we possibly can. Right now, Indiana's doing that. Right now, UCLA is doing that. USC is doing that. Rutgers does that. Oregon is getting up there a little bit doing that. Michigan does that. So you'll see a lot of videos from those types of teams and some other teams and stuff like that we'll put out too. So, all right, we appreciate everybody for listening and watching the Big Ten Huddle. Have a good one, and we'll see you next time.